Everyone thinks they know what Brittney Griner said to Caitlin Clark that night, but the real story is something the internet completely missed, and it changes everything you thought you knew about their rivalry. Because by the end of this video, you're going to find out what actually happened in that tunnel, why Griner never said a word publicly for almost a month, and what she was really hiding. And the answer connects directly to a record she just broke this year, one that nobody saw coming. Before we get into it, if you're new here, this channel covers the biggest WNBA stories every single week, breaking down what's real, what's spin, and what the league doesn't want you to notice. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one, because today's story has layers most outlets never bothered to dig into. The moment everyone got wrong. It started on a Thursday night in Atlanta. The Indiana Fever and the Atlanta Dream were tangled in one of the most physical matchups of the season, and Caitlin Clark's Fever pulled out an 81-76 win. Clark finished with 11 points and 6 assists. Ryan Howard and Brianna Jones carried the Dream with 24 and 15 points. On paper, it was just another close, chippy game between two teams that genuinely did not like each other. But the moment that actually went viral had nothing to do with the score. In the closing minutes, Brittney Griner fouled out. As she walked back to the bench, cameras caught her mouth moving, clearly frustrated, clearly saying something. There was no audio. And that silence is exactly what let the story spiral out of control. Because what people thought she said became a bigger story than anything that happened on the court, and that's where things start to get messy. Amateur lip readers online decided Griner had called Clark trash, and worse, that she'd directed a slur at her over her race. The clip exploded. Commentators picked it apart frame by frame. Conservative media figures, including former college swimmer turned commentator Riley Gaines, shared the clip and framed it as proof Griner had turned on Clark out of resentment. The backlash brought up Griner's past, her 2022 arrest in Russia, her 9-year prison sentence, and her release in a prisoner swap for arms dealer Victor Bout, none of which had anything to do with a foul call, but all of it got dragged back into the conversation anyway. For weeks, Griner said nothing. Then, before a June matchup against the Washington Mystics, a reporter finally asked her directly. Her answer was short and unambiguous. "No, would never say that," Griner said. She also said she genuinely didn't remember the specifics of the moment beyond being angry about the foul call. No audio ever surfaced to confirm or deny the lip reader's version. The controversy was, in the end, built entirely on speculation. Why this story refused to die. Here's the part most recaps skip. This wasn't really about one foul-out moment. It was about what Caitlin Clark had already become by that point in the season. The single most polarizing, most watched player in the history of the league. And what that meant for every veteran sharing the court with her. Every hard screen, every eye roll, every muttered word under a veteran's breath got run through a magnifying glass the moment it involved Clark. Some of that scrutiny was earned. Some of it wasn't. Griner's moment landed right in the middle of that storm, and because there was no audio, the internet simply filled in the blank with the worst possible version. But here's the twist almost nobody followed up on. What happened to Brittney Griner after that season is the real story, and it's not the one you'd expect. The quiet goodbye. Griner spent the 2025 season with the Atlanta Dream, her first year away from the Phoenix Mercury after more than a decade there. It was, by her own standards, a quiet year, 9.8 points and 5.2 rebounds a game across 39 appearances. Respectable, but nowhere near her peak. Still, she quietly climbed into second place all-time in league history in blocked shots and 16th all-time in rebounds. Nobody was talking about it because Clark headlines dominated everything that season. Then, in April 2026, Griner signed a 1-year deal with a completely different franchise, the Connecticut Sun. At 35 years old, in her 13th season, she talked openly about stepping into a role she'd never fully embraced before. Vocal leadership. "I got a chip on my shoulder," Griner said. "A lot of people counting me out, want to call me old, want to say I need to retire, but I'm not." A record nobody saw coming, and then it happened. On June 22nd, 2026, in a game against the Chicago Sky, Brittney Griner became the WNBA's all-time leader in blocked shots. 13 years into her career, after a Russian prison sentence, after a quiet farewell tour year in Atlanta, after a viral controversy that painted her as basketball's villain, she owns a record no one else in league history holds. And that's not even the most surprising part of her 2026 story. Because the team she signed with, the Connecticut Sun, is not just having a rough season, it's playing out its final year in Connecticut altogether. The franchise is set to relocate and become the Houston Comets, meaning Griner's one-year deal quietly put her at the center of the last chapter of an entire WNBA franchise's history. It hasn't been an easy ride. Griner has battled a left knee injury for stretches of the season, sitting out multiple games down the stretch, even as she continued to lead her team in scoring and blocks whenever she was on the floor, averaging right around 14 points, 5.5 rebounds, and just under 2 blocks a night. Meanwhile, Clark's own storm. While Griner was quietly rewriting the record book in Connecticut, Caitlin Clark was dealing with an entirely different kind of scrutiny back in Indiana. Her on-court demeanor in 2026 became its own storyline. More pushback at officials, more visible frustration, a sharper edge than the version of her fans saw as a rookie. Analysts Michelle Beadle and Linda Cohn addressed it directly on air, with Beadle putting it bluntly. Clark was showing the league she's not a soft, cuddly kitty cat, that she doesn't need anyone's help, and that she's willing to get in referees' faces when she disagrees with a call. But the officiating debate wasn't even the biggest controversy Clark walked into that summer. During WNBA All-Star Weekend, voting results sparked backlash of their own, with former star Candace Parker publicly calling out players over how the vote played out, telling critics bluntly to go to a therapist. It was a sign of just how much tension still surrounds Clark's place in the league, more than 2 years after her rookie season began. What actually connects them? So here's where it all comes together. Griner and Clark were never really rivals in the way that viral clip made it look. They were two players caught in the same current. A league experiencing more attention, more money, and more pressure than it has ever had, where every gesture gets 1,000 different interpretations before the person who made it ever gets a chance to explain. Griner spent 2026 quietly building a Hall of Fame case in a city that's about to lose its team, breaking a record that will outlast every headline written about her. Clark spent it carrying a spotlight so intense that even a simple back and forth with a referee becomes a national story. And that leaves one question the league still hasn't answered. What happens to that spotlight once Clark isn't the only superstar drawing it? Because as more of Clark's peers step into stardom of their own, as records fall, as franchises relocate, as new rivalries form, the pressure that once sat entirely on one 22-year-old's shoulders is starting to spread across the whole league. Whether that makes the WNBA stronger or whether it creates the next viral moment nobody has context for is something we're going to be watching closely all season. If you want to be here when that next story breaks, make sure you're subscribed, notifications on, because this is only getting bigger from here.